The Human Wildcard, How We Outsmarted the Galaxy. The galaxy was a vast, unforgiving place. Thousands of species had risen, thrived, and fallen to time, each one adapting, evolving, and claiming their territory. By the time humanity had come into the cosmic fold, most advanced civilizations had long since established their dominance, and intergalactic politics had settled into an intricate web of alliances, treaties, and power struggles. The Unseen, a coalition of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful species, ruled with quiet authority. Life beyond their borders was a game, a chessboard they played with little concern for those outside their reach. Humanity was a mere afterthought in the grand scheme of galactic diplomacy. Young, brash, and impulsive, Earth's emissaries had been dismissed as inconsequential when they first entered the galactic arena. The Unseen had their eyes on the stars, and humanity was just one more species to manipulate, to use, and ultimately discard. But the Unseen had underestimated the one thing that humans excelled at more than any species they had ever encountered: unpredictability. The first sign that something was amiss came during the Interstellar Trade Conference held on the neutral moon of Quaros. The galaxy's power brokers gathered there every century to discuss resources, trade routes, and balance of power. It was a place where deals were struck in hushed tones and the smallest mistake could cost a species its position in the galactic hierarchy. This time, Earth had secured an invitation, a rare and delicate gesture toward humanity's increasing importance. A simple exchange of resources between humans and the Xeran Alliance should have been a straightforward matter. The Xerans, known for their biological expertise, were providing Earth with much-needed medical advancements in exchange for rare Earth minerals. It was a mutually beneficial deal, or so it appeared. As the conference began, a lone human representative, Ambassador Nyssa Owens, stepped into the Grand Hall, her presence causing a ripple among the assembled delegates. Nyssa was known for her strategic mind, but even those who respected her underestimated her ability to play the game of galactic politics. She didn't care for the rules, she wasn't interested in alliances or favors. She had come to do one thing: make sure humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't dictated by anyone else. The Unseen, along with their allies, had assumed that Nyssa would fall in line, abide by the unspoken agreements that had held the galaxy together for centuries. They believed that humanity would dutifully trade resources, remain the newcomers, and, in time, be absorbed into the greater galactic fold. But Nyssa had a different plan. She understood that every alliance, every treaty, was a means to an end. And she was ready to turn the tables. As the negotiations began, Nyssa carefully observed the room, watching how each species interacted, noting the unspoken gestures, the subtle manipulations. She could hear the unsaid words in the silence between each statement. The Xerans were clearly nervous, something wasn't right. Their representatives kept glancing at the unseen delegates, as though awaiting orders. Nyssa didn't wait for the first move, she made it herself. Without warning, she presented an alternative trade deal, one that favored the Xerans far more than the Earth delegation was prepared to offer. The room fell silent. Even the Unseen, who prided themselves on their ability to control every situation, looked taken aback. No one had expected a human to take control of the negotiations so boldly, and even less so to present a deal that could disrupt the entire balance of power. The Xerans, clearly caught off guard, hesitated. They were used to manipulating weaker species, not the other way around. Nyssa's proposal wasn't just a counteroffer, it was a trap, designed to put them in a position where they had no choice but to accept or risk inciting a confrontation with the Unseen. It was a clever move, one that exploited the Xerans' vulnerability and the Unseen's oversight. The galaxy's oldest powers had never anticipated that humans, with all their inexperience, might actually outthink them. The tension in the room was palpable. Ambassadors from various species exchanged looks, unsure of how to respond. Nyssa's strategy was unconventional, daring, and, to them, deeply unsettling. They had expected to dictate the terms, but now they found themselves scrambling to regain control of a situation they didn't fully understand. It was then that the truth began to settle in: humanity was a wild card. They weren't bound by the same political structures, the same histories, or the same expectations. they had the advantage of unpredictability. And as Nyssa watched the shifting expressions of the galactic elite, she knew one thing with certainty: the galaxy had just underestimated humanity, and it wouldn't be the last time. In the aftermath of the trade conference, the galaxy was abuzz. News of Nyssa Owen's audacious move spread like wildfire across the stars. The Zirans, unwilling to risk losing everything, had reluctantly agreed to the humans' terms, with minimal alteration. But the unseen were not as forgiving. Their once unquestioned grip on the galaxy's political stage had been shaken, and they were enraged by the audacity of a species they had dismissed as mere children in the galactic playground. The balance of power had been subtly, but irrevocably, shifted. Humanity was no longer the weak newcomer, they were the threat no one had seen coming. Back on Earth, Nyssa's victory was celebrated as a triumph of strategy and ingenuity. In the eyes of her people, she was a hero, the embodiment of human potential and defiance. But Nyssa knew better than to believe in victory without consequences. The unseen weren't the type to tolerate such a breach of protocol. The galaxy's oldest powers weren't about to let a single human outsmart them without retaliation. Within days, clandestine messages began circulating through the channels of interstellar diplomacy, a warning shot fired across humanity's bow. The unseen had mobilized. The subtle manipulations, the carefully orchestrated threats, began to surface. They didn't need to attack humanity directly. All they had to do was destabilize Earth's fragile alliances and expose the cracks in their position. They would force humanity back into its place, remind them of the hierarchy that had governed the galaxy for millennia. Nyssa didn't wait for the unseen to make their move. She had anticipated it. Under the guise of routine interstellar communication, she had already initiated her own set of maneuvers, quietly working behind the scenes to counteract the unseen's influence. She knew that the human advantage lay in their unpredictability. Humanity could fight the unseen, not by brute force, but by turning their own tactics against them. She called upon the oldest of human assets, creativity. It was something that no other species in the galaxy seemed to truly understand. Humans could think in ways no one else could. They didn't just solve problems, they approached them from angles no one else would dare consider. Nyssa wasn't interested in traditional diplomacy. She wasn't going to fight the unseen with their rules. She was going to rewrite the rules. First, Nyssa reached out to the Tazkar, a species known for their advanced hacking capabilities. The Tazkar had long operated as mercenaries in the digital realm, their skills in manipulating data and communications unparalleled. They were a small faction, but their influence over the galaxy's information network was vast. With their help, Nyssa began to build an intricate web of misinformation, one designed to confuse and divide the unseen's allies. By planting false intelligence, she set the stage for an ideological fracture within the coalition. The unseen's own allies began to question their loyalties, unsure of what was truth and what was fabrication. Meanwhile, Nyssa cultivated an alliance with the Virith, a nomadic species that had long been neutral in galactic affairs. The Virith, known for their swiftness and stealth, were experts in guerrilla tactics, often operating in the shadows and avoiding direct confrontations. Through careful negotiation, Nyssa convinced them to take a more active role in the galactic chess game. The Virith were initially hesitant, but Nyssa made them an offer they couldn't refuse: access to humanity's rapidly advancing military technologies in exchange for their services as spies and covert operatives. The Tazkar and Virith weren't the only ones who felt the pull of Nyssa's vision. Soon, other species, previously indifferent to humanity, began to see the potential in an alliance with Earth. The Swir, a telepathic species, found the human capacity for deception fascinating. The Drakari, a species of relentless warriors, saw humans as potential partners in a battle for dominance. The alliances Nyssa had carefully crafted were starting to take shape, and what began as a fractured human initiative was slowly evolving into a formidable coalition. The unseen were quick to notice. Their attempts to consolidate their power were met with increasing resistance. Diplomatic channels were clouded with lies, and their military actions were delayed by the Viritha's sabotage efforts. Their most trusted allies were beginning to waver, questioning the wisdom of their centuries-old arrangements. The Unseen had never expected a species like humanity to rise so quickly, to wield such influence without firing a single shot. And yet, as the situation escalated, Nyssa understood that this was only the beginning. The Unseen's wrath would come soon enough. But they had already underestimated humanity once. They would soon learn that when faced with the unknown variables, when up against a species that refused to play by the rules, the real game had just begun. As the galaxy trembled in the wake of Nyssa Owen's audacious moves, the stakes grew higher. The Unseen, desperate to regain control, began tightening their grip on the galaxy's power structures. The weight of their ancient influence was vast, but even their vast resources were beginning to show signs of strain. Humanity, now playing a game of subtle subterfuge and strategic alliances, was more than just a thorn in their side, it was a force that could topple them entirely. Nyssa knew this was the calm before the storm. The Unseen were not creatures who would let an entire species, especially one as brash and unpredictable as humanity, undermine their centuries of careful governance. She could almost feel the pressure building, a sense of inevitability hanging in the air. She had prepared for this moment, she had prepared humanity for war, though it would not be a conventional one. The Unseen responded with force, but not in the way humanity expected. Their first move was subtle, an economic embargo, targeting critical supplies that Earth had grown reliant upon. The galaxy's major trade routes were disrupted, cutting off humanity's access to resources. At first, the humans were caught off guard. The impact of the embargo was felt immediately. Medical supplies halted, trade with the Virith slowed, and military goods became scarce. Earth's colonies, which had started to thrive under the human-led alliances, suddenly found themselves under economic siege. The Unseen were trying to cripple humanity's growing influence without firing a single shot. However, what the Unseen failed to understand was the nature of human resolve. The embargo was nothing more than a challenge to be overcome. Earth's industries were innovative, pragmatic. While the galaxy's oldest civilizations were content to rely on established power, humanity could pivot on a dime, adapting to changing circumstances with a flexibility that others lacked. In the face of growing scarcity, Earth's scientists and engineers began working overtime. Within weeks, the first prototypes of self-sustaining colonies emerged. These new systems were designed to be completely independent of galactic trade, capable of operating using local resources and alternative supply chains. Humanity didn't just endure under the embargo, they thrived. Far from retreating into desperation, they embraced the challenge. But the Unseen had only just begun their assault. Soon after the economic measures, they launched a psychological campaign to further destabilize humanity. Rumors spread, whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy. There were reports of Earth's leadership fracturing, of rebellion brewing within their own ranks. Some claimed Nyssa Owens was a puppet of the Virith, using human resources for her own personal gain. Others whispered that Earth's colonies were in revolt, no longer trusting the promises of a government that had seemed too eager to align with the galaxy's more mysterious factions. To the average citizen of the galaxy, the Unseen's propaganda seemed believable. Humanity's meteoric rise had been swift, and the sudden appearance of new alliances, new leaders, was unsettling to many who had grown accustomed to their galaxy's order. Earth's history, so short and chaotic compared to that of the Unseen, made them seem like a flash in the pan, an unstable force that would burn out as quickly as it had risen. But again, the Unseen had miscalculated. Humanity had faced adversity and skepticism before. The era of global conflict on Earth had built a resilience in their species that no amount of psychological warfare could break. What the Unseen didn't understand was that humanity's distrust of authority and their chaotic nature made them impossible to control. They were a species that thrived on rebellion, on defiance. And now, in the face of all that pressure, the seeds of rebellion were taking root, not only against the Unseen but also within their own ranks. Nyssa, ever the strategist, knew how to turn these tactics to her advantage. With the psychological assault mounted against her, she made a bold move, she publicly acknowledged the rumors. In a galaxy where leaders carefully curated their public image, Nyssa did the unthinkable, she admitted that humanity had made mistakes, that they had underestimated the galaxy's complexities. But she didn't stop there. She laid out a vision of a new human empire, one founded not on control, but on unity among the galaxy's diverse species. She appealed directly to the underdog factions, those who had suffered at the hands of the unseen or had been cast aside in the power struggles of old. Her words spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, a wave of disillusionment began to take hold. The smaller, less powerful species, who had long been crushed beneath the unseen's boot, began to see in humanity something they had never seen before, a species willing to fight for equality, for a seat at the table. The unseen had promised peace for millennia, but they had only delivered stagnation. Humanity, on the other hand, offered something more: change. Even among the unseen's ranks, whispers began. Some of their allies, disillusioned with the status quo, began reaching out to humanity in secret, offering their support. The unseen's perfect web of control was fraying, and Nyssa knew that now was the time to capitalize on the rebellion, on both sides of the war. As tensions escalated, the galaxy teetered on the edge of all-out war, but this time, it wouldn't be the unseen who controlled the narrative. Humanity had taken its first step in rewriting the rules, and the seeds of rebellion had been sown. Whether the galaxy was ready for the storm that was about to unfold was another question entirely, but one thing was clear: humanity's place among the stars was no longer in question. It was theirs to take. The first shots of the galaxy's growing conflict weren't fired in the open, but rather in the shadows, where alliances were broken and covert operations began to surface. Nyssa Owens knew that the unseen had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and fight back, but she also knew that the galaxy would never be the same again. The struggle for control, for power, and for the future of interstellar peace was no longer a distant concern, it was happening now, and humanity was at the heart of it. The psychological campaign the unseen had waged had done its damage, but Nyssa had turned it into a rallying cry for the oppressed species of the galaxy. Her vision of a united human empire had resonated far beyond Earth. The Virith, the Swir, the Drakari, all of them saw a potential future in an alliance with humanity that they had never seen with the unseen. Even the Zirans, who had once sought to distance themselves from human politics, found themselves swayed by the idea of a galaxy no longer ruled by the old powers. The unseen knew that if they did not act quickly, they would lose everything. They were not the type of species to let a challenge go unanswered, and the first real strike came in the form of a covert attack against one of humanity's key supply colonies on the Outer Rim, Siren 9. The colony had long been a symbol of human ingenuity, built in the most hostile of environments. It was where Nyssa had first tested her theories about self-sustaining colonies, and it had become a linchpin in humanity's growing independence. The unseen, with their mastery of intelligence networks, had been watching carefully, waiting for the right moment to cripple the human expansion. They had set their sights on Siren 9, and one night, without warning, a fleet of cloaked warships arrived in orbit above the colony. The attack was swift, targeted, and devastating. Military communications were scrambled, the colony's defenses were neutralized, and human casualties mounted. It was a devastating blow to Earth's morale, a clear message that the unseen would not sit idly by as humanity continued to encroach on their long-held power. For Nyssa, however, it was more than just a blow, it was a call to arms. The unseen had played their hand, and they had shown their true colors. There was no room for diplomacy anymore, no more subtle games. Humanity would fight to the bitter end, and Nyssa would ensure that every species aligned with them would be ready. In the days that followed, Nyssa made a bold decision. She called for the formation of the Galactic Resistance. This coalition would be humanity's answer to the unseen's brutality. Not just a military force, but a collective of species dedicated to overthrowing the unseen stranglehold on the galaxy. The resistance would not simply be a military alliance, it would be a movement of ideals, a new vision for the future of the stars. Her call was heard loud and clear. The Virith, already deeply involved in espionage, provided intelligence networks that tracked unseen movements across the galaxy. The Tazkar, masters of digital warfare, launched a series of cyber attacks against the unseen's command centers, crippling their communications and sowing confusion within their ranks. The Drakari warriors, bloodied and loyal, pledged their blades to humanity's cause, while the Swir, fascinated by the human spirit, offered their telepathic abilities to coordinate their forces and read the battlefield in ways the unseen could not. The galaxy's old powers had never faced a force like this. The unseen were used to infighting, backstabbing, and maneuvering within their own elite circles. But the galactic resistance was different. It was an alliance born from desperation, but also from the realization that they shared a common enemy. The time for quiet diplomacy was over. The time for revolution had arrived. As the Resistance's forces gathered, the first major offensive came from the Tazkar, who hacked into the Unseen's vast communication network. They intercepted and broadcasted secret messages between the Unseen's highest-ranking officials, exposing the extent of their plans to suppress the galaxy's other species. The Unseen, with all their sophistication, had never anticipated that their own secrets would be used against them. Humanity, now emboldened by this public revelation, struck next. Siren 9's destruction had galvanized their resolve, and within weeks, humanity's fleet had been mobilized. The first real battle between the Resistance and the Unseen took place above the ruins of Siren 9, where Nyssa herself commanded Earth's flagship, the Aegis. The battle was brutal. The Unseen, though technologically superior, were blindsided by the ferocity and unpredictability of humanity's tactics. Where the Unseen's ships moved in coordinated, calculated formations, humanity's fleet, backed by their newly formed alliances, fought with wild abandon. The Drakari's brutal, direct assault tactics collided with the Viratha's guerrilla warfare, while the Swir coordinated telepathic strikes that sowed panic in the hearts of the Unseen commanders. The Unseen quickly realized that they were not facing an enemy that could be reasoned with or manipulated. They were facing a new era, a galaxy where humanity and its allies had learned how to fight with everything they had. And they fought for more than just survival, they fought for the future of the galaxy itself. By the time the battle above Siren 9 ended, the Unseen's fleet had been forced to retreat. It was a hard-won victory, but a victory nonetheless. The galaxy had just witnessed the first tangible sign that the Unseen's reign was not as secure as they had believed. For Nyssa Owens, this was only the beginning. The Resistance was gaining strength, and the galaxy had started to take notice. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, but humanity and its allies were no longer under the shadow of the Unseen. The fires of rebellion had been stoked, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The battle above Siren 9 had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For the first time in millennia, the Unseen were forced to retreat, their seemingly invincible fleet scattered by the ferocity of humanity's combined forces. But even in their defeat, the Unseen were not easily broken. They regrouped swiftly, their leadership more determined than ever to quash the growing rebellion. The age of subtle manipulations was over, the galaxy was now plunged into full-scale war. Humanity, once the underdog, had become the spark that ignited the firestorm. Nyssa Owens, having led the charge at Siren 9, understood that the Unseen would strike back with overwhelming force. They would not tolerate this embarrassment, this humiliation, especially not from a species they had long dismissed as inconsequential. But Nyssa wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, she was fighting for the very future of the galaxy, and she knew that if humanity was to emerge victorious, they would need more than just military strength. They would need unity, unwavering resolve, and the will to stand together in the face of impossible odds. With the Unseen regrouping and launching counterattacks, Nyssa called for the galactic resistance to mobilize in full. The Virath stepped up, launching guerrilla campaigns on the Unseen supply routes, striking from the shadows and making it impossible for their enemy to predict ere the next blow would land. The Tazkar expanded their digital sabotage, crippling the Unseen's military communication systems and leaving their fleets blind and vulnerable. The Drakari sharpened their war axes, ready for the brutal battles to come, while the Swir's telepathic network allowed the Resistance to coordinate their forces with uncanny precision. Humanity's own fleet, bolstered by new weapons developed from the resources of their newly established self-sustaining colonies, joined the fight with a sense of purpose that was unshakable. Despite the growing strength of the Resistance, the Unseen were not content to be passive. Their retaliation came in the form of an overwhelming assault on the homeworlds of the Virith, a devastatingly targeted attack meant to eliminate one of humanity's most powerful allies. The Unseen had learned from Siren 9 and realized that they needed to strike at the heart of the rebellion, to crush the spirit of their adversaries before they could gather more strength. The Virith, known for their speed and stealth, had been a thorn in the side of the Unseen for years. Their homeworld, a planet of jagged cliffs and dense forests, had always been a difficult place to conquer, its terrain as treacherous as the Virith themselves. But the Unseen had the advantage of numbers, and they came in droves, overwhelming the Viritha's defenses with precision strikes and surgical assaults that shattered their once impenetrable shield. The news of the Viritha's fall hit the resistance hard. The galaxy had just lost one of its most capable fighters, and morale was shaken. The Virith had been a symbol of the Resistance's unity, a species that had fought for the same cause, side by side with humanity. With their fall, it seemed as if the war was tipping in the Unseen's favor once again. But Nissa, ever the strategist, knew that this defeat, while painful, was not the end. It was a reminder of the price of freedom. The loss of the Virith was a rallying point, a catalyst that would ignite the flames of vengeance and justice in the hearts of the galaxy's oppressed. She called for a solemn gathering of the Resistance's remaining leaders, species who had lost much but had not lost hope. The meeting was held in the heart of human-controlled space, on the reclaimed station of Eris 4, now the headquarters of the Galactic Resistance. Nissa stood before the assembly, her gaze steady, her voice unwavering. "We fight not just for the Virith," she said, "but for every species that has been crushed under the Unseen's heel for millennia. The Virith will not be forgotten. They will live on in every act of defiance, every victory we secure." Her words struck a chord with everyone present. The Unseen had struck their hardest blow, but it was clear to all that they could not break the spirit of those who had joined the resistance. The galaxy was waking up, and the old powers were now fighting a war on multiple fronts. Humanity's military might was growing, but so was their influence. As the resistance expanded, more species who had once been neutral or hesitant to join began to rally to their cause. The Unseen had underestimated humanity's ability to unite the galaxy's fragmented species. What had started as a fight for survival had now become a war for the very soul of the galaxy. In the wake of the Viritha's destruction, a new front opened up, the unification of the galaxy's remaining neutral factions. The once passive species, the Malari, the Arwemen, and the Gorlok, had seen enough. The Unseen's terror had spurred them into action, and they offered their fleets, their technology, and their forces to the resistance. Nissa's call for unity had struck deep, and the galaxy was slowly but surely falling behind humanity's banner. But the Unseen were far from finished. They had begun to employ more drastic tactics, pushing the galaxy to the brink of annihilation. They launched a direct attack on the core systems, targeting critical infrastructure, mining operations, and energy production facilities that fed the Resistance's war machine. The attacks were merciless, designed to cripple humanity's capacity to continue the war. It was their final attempt to break the will of the galaxy. But what the Unseen had not anticipated was the resilience of humanity's allies. The Zirans, once wary of humanity's rise, now stood shoulder to shoulder with Earth's forces. The Gorlok, long known for their ability to terraform and manipulate environments, developed countermeasures to protect humanity's homeworld from the Unseen's devastating strikes. The Resistance was adapting to every new move the Unseen made, learning, evolving, and becoming stronger with each passing day. The galaxy was in the midst of a war unlike any it had seen before. The Unseen were fighting not only for control but for survival, their once impenetrable dominance now in jeopardy. And Nissa Owens, standing at the forefront of this revolution, knew one thing above all else: humanity would not just survive this war, they would shape the galaxy in their image. The old powers would fall, and a new order would rise from the ashes. The war had reached its tipping point. The Unseen, battered by the relentless resistance, had become desperate. Their once invincible fleets were now fragmented and divided, struggling to maintain control over the territories they had once ruled with an iron fist. Humanity and its allies had become a formidable force, and the galaxy could no longer ignore the rising tide of change. What had started as a rebellion had transformed into a full-scale revolution, with one goal in mind: the end of the Unseen's tyranny and the creation of a new galaxy, a galaxy where all species were free. But even as victory seemed within reach, Nyssa Owens knew that the final battle would be the hardest yet. The Unseen were cornered, and cornered animals were the most dangerous. They would stop at nothing to retain their power. Their final gambit was clear: they would launch an all-out assault on the heart of the Resistance, the human homeworld of Earth itself. The Unseen's plan was as cunning as it was ruthless. They had gathered their remaining fleets in secret, hiding in the dark recesses of the galaxy, out of reach of the Resistance's reconnaissance. The last of their political allies had abandoned them, leaving them with only their military strength to rely on. But their military strength was still considerable. And now, they were prepared to strike at Earth, aiming to cripple humanity's morale once and for all. If they could destroy the symbol of human defiance, the very homeworld from which this revolution had sprung, then perhaps they could break the spirit of the galaxy's greatest threat. Nyssa knew that Earth's position in the galaxy, both symbolically and strategically, made it the ultimate target. The Unseen's greatest strength was their ability to strike swiftly and decisively, and they had planned their final assault meticulously. Their fleet would attack in waves, using newly developed weapons that could disable Earth's defense systems before the human fleet could even respond. The hope was that humanity would be thrown into chaos, their remaining allies scattered and uncertain. But what the Unseen didn't count on was the resolve of humanity's leadership. Nyssa had anticipated this move. Earth would not fall so easily. In a daring maneuver, Nyssa ordered a feigned retreat, drawing the Unseen fleet deeper into human-controlled space. The goal was simple: lure the Unseen into a trap where they would be caught in the crossfire of a multi-pronged attack. But Nyssa's strategy relied on precise coordination and the element of surprise, two things the Unseen would not expect from a species that they had long thought unpredictable. As the Unseen fleet moved closer to Earth's orbit, thinking that they had cornered their prey, the Resistance struck. The Virith, though decimated in their home system, had regrouped in the outer rim, and they launched a surprise assault on the Unseen supply lines, cutting off their access to critical resources. The Tazkar unleashed a barrage of cyber attacks, scrambling the Unseen fleet's communications and sowing confusion among their commanders. The Drakari, once again, led a brutal assault on the Unseen's forward positions, forcing their ships to scatter. But the true brilliance of Nyssa's plan came from humanity's own ingenuity. Earth's engineers had developed a new weapon, one that the Unseen had never anticipated: the gravitic disruptor. This weapon, designed by Earth's top scientists, could manipulate gravity fields on a massive scale, creating localized black holes that could tear through the heart of any fleet. The weapon's range was limited, but it was enough to cause catastrophic damage to any Unseen warship within its proximity. When the Unseen's fleet reached the final stage of their assault, they were caught in the gravitational storm created by the gravitic disruptor. Unseen ships were pulled into the gravitational anomalies, their hulls buckling under the immense pressure, their systems failing as they were torn apart by forces they had never encountered. It was a devastating display of humanity's technological prowess, a weapon designed not just to destroy, but to show the galaxy that humanity had the power to reshape the battlefield itself. But the Unseen were not finished. As their fleets crumbled, they resorted to their final, most desperate measure: the use of a device known only as the Eclipse Protocol. This weapon was a galaxy-shattering device capable of plunging entire star systems into darkness, disrupting the flow of energy and communication across vast stretches of space. It was a doomsday weapon, and its launch was imminent. With the Unseen cornered, Nyssa realized that the only way to stop the Eclipse Protocol from firing was to launch a final assault on the Unseen's last stronghold, an ancient, hidden fortress located on a planet that had long been abandoned by galactic civilization. This fortress was heavily guarded, its location known only to the highest-ranking members of the Unseen. It was their last line of defense, and the only thing standing between the galaxy and total annihilation. In a last-ditch effort, Nyssa gathered the full might of the Resistance. It was a dangerous mission, one that would require them to infiltrate the fortress and disable the Eclipse Protocol before it could unleash its devastation. The galaxy's fate hung in the balance. The mission was perilous. The fortress was well protected, its defenses nearly impenetrable. Yet, humanity's greatest strength was their unpredictability. In a daring, desperate strike, Nyssa led the final assault. The Drakari charged in with their brutal assault tactics, smashing through enemy lines, while the Swir coordinated the attack using their telepathic network. The Tazkar disrupted the fortress's systems, and the Virith, now emboldened by their renewed resolve, fought like never before. As Nyssa and her team reached the heart of the fortress, they faced the final challenge, the unseen commander in charge of the Eclipse Protocol. This being, an ancient and calculating creature, was the embodiment of the Unseen's cruel reign. But Nyssa had something the Unseen commander did not, the unyielding will of humanity and its allies. In an epic final confrontation, Nyssa confronted the Unseen commander, their words sharp and their resolve unshakable. "The galaxy belongs to those who fight for it," Nyssa declared. And with that, the commander was defeated, the Eclipse Protocol destroyed. The victory was hard won, but it was a victory nonetheless. The Unseen were no longer a threat. The galaxy had been freed. And as the stars burned bright in the aftermath of the battle, Nyssa knew that humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer a question. They had fought, they had won, and now they would lead. The galaxy was finally free. The galaxy was forever changed. The fall of the Unseen Empire marked the beginning of a new age, one where the old order had crumbled, and the forces of tyranny had been replaced by the collective will of the galaxy's people. The Unseen, once thought invincible, lay in ruins. Their fleets had been scattered, their leadership shattered, and their once iron grip on the galaxy had been completely broken. Nyssa Owens stood on the observation deck of the Aegis, looking out at the stars. The battle was over, but the work had only just begun. The galaxy, liberated from centuries of oppression, now faced the immense task of rebuilding. Alliances had been forged, old rivalries had been put aside, and the species of the galaxy, many of whom had once been slaves to the Unseen's will, now stood together as equals. Yet, this newfound unity was fragile, and Nyssa knew that it was only through constant effort and vigilance that the peace could be preserved. In the wake of their victory, humanity had become a beacon of hope across the galaxy. Nyssa's vision for a united future, one where species work together for the common good, had inspired countless worlds to follow in humanity's footsteps. The Galactic Resistance was now the Galactic Union, a council of species dedicated to the principles of freedom, justice, and cooperation. But the road ahead was not without its challenges. The Unseen's fall had left a power vacuum, and though the galaxy had united to defeat them, it was unclear who would fill the void. Many smaller factions, some with conflicting interests, now vied for control, and the potential for conflict remained high. It was clear that the new era would not be free from strife. There would always be those who sought power for themselves, even if it meant returning to the old ways. Nyssa was no fool. She understood the delicate balance that had to be maintained. The galaxy was in a state of flux, and while many had rallied behind the banner of the Galactic Union, there were still those who had yet to fully embrace the ideals of unity and peace. And there were those who had been too long in the shadows, waiting for the opportunity to seize power when the time was right. The Council of the Galactic Union, now made up of representatives from every species that had stood against the Unseen, had set to work rebuilding. Plans were already in place to create a new galactic economy, one that would be fair and equitable, ensuring that no species would dominate another. Trade routes were being re-established, communication networks were being restored, and systems that had once been under the Unseen's control were now free to govern themselves. The Virith were among those leading the charge in restoring the galaxy's infrastructure, using their knowledge of espionage and stealth to ensure that no hostile power could seize control again. But Nyssa knew that the rebuilding process would be slow. Trust, once broken, could not be easily mended. The scars left by the Unseen's reign ran deep, and many species still struggled to let go of their old ways. The road to true peace would take time, and it would require patience, understanding, and leadership. It was a responsibility that Nyssa, as the leader of the resistance, was willing to bear. As the days passed, humanity began to take its rightful place as a guiding force in the galaxy. Earth was no longer just a symbol of resistance, it was a symbol of hope, of what could be accomplished when species set aside their differences and fought for the greater good. Nyssa knew that humanity's future was bright, but it was also fraught with challenges. There were still unknown threats in the galaxy, factions that had stayed out of the war, watching from the shadows, waiting for the opportunity to strike. But Nyssa was not afraid. She had seen what humanity was capable of, what they had already achieved, and she knew that as long as the galaxy stood united, they could face whatever came next. The resistance had been born out of necessity, but now the Galactic Union would thrive because of a shared vision. It was a vision that stretched far beyond the borders of Earth, one where every species had a voice, and every world had a place in the galaxy's future. In the months that followed, the new government took shape. The Galactic Union was officially established, its council becoming the primary governing body that would ensure peace and cooperation across the galaxy. Nyssa, ever the leader, was offered the position of High Chancellor, a role that would allow her to guide the galaxy through its reconstruction. But she knew that the time had come to step aside and let new voices rise. The fight for the galaxy's future had been won, but now the work of governance, of building a lasting peace, was in the hands of others. Nyssa passed on the title of High Chancellor, instead taking on a new role, Ambassador of Unity. Her mission was to continue the work she had started as the leader of the resistance, but in a more diplomatic capacity. She would travel from system to system, fostering relationships, mediating disputes, and ensuring that the principles of the Galactic Union were upheld across the galaxy. As Nyssa looked out across the stars, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The galaxy was no longer ruled by fear. The species that had once been divided, fractured by war and oppression, had come together to forge a new path forward. Humanity had led the charge, and now, together with their allies, they would shape the future. The war was over. The galaxy was free. And as Nyssa watched the stars gleam in the distance, she knew that the true work was only just beginning. The dawn of a new era had arrived. And it was one that would be defined not by the tyranny of the unseen, but by the unity of all sentient beings. Humanity had proven its worth, and now, in this new galaxy, it was their time to lead. The galaxy's future was bright, and its stars shone with the promise of endless possibilities.